It was the character, the strength of character. It was, at first, you could say there were two main impressions. One was the strength of being, of that being. He wasn't just a hero. It was sort of something beyond being a hero in the sense of somebody brave and courageous, forthright. That and an incredible ability to inspire, to convey. All I can say is love. Whatever love means, don't ask me. What do I know? All I know is that he inspired, so that, as far as I'm concerned, there's only one thing to do. What else is there to follow? Who else is there? When he says, as he does, that I am the only reality, somehow or other that makes sense. I don't understand, I can't conceive of the fact that I don't exist, that there is only Baba, that he is the only reality, that existence which all we know is there, but we can't see, is the reality. And yet at the same time, you say, yes, yeah. Somehow you can accept it without understanding.
So could you please
could
you please describe your conversations now? I don't describe too much. Tell us about it. So,
all right. Okay. So as I've said, Baba, without any mention, without any word whatever about my financial position, what I did, what work I did, nothing of that sort. Baba solved the problem of our accommodation by simply saying to Francis, that house that you're building in Beacon Hill, Sydney, hand it over to Bill. In one sense, in one way, it's interesting. You could also say that, because Baba referred to me as Francis' right hand, that I was the practical one. And it's interesting the fact that 13 years later, Baba then said to Francis, hand Avatar's abode, which was also in his name, over to me. It indicated, you could say, that was my role to take care of the properties and look after them and develop them. Okay, then at another point in the interview, Baba suddenly turned to John. Now John was on Francis's left, at the end, and he suddenly turned and looked at John and said, who do you take me to be? I'm watching this, and it was so beautiful. I mean, Baba's face expressed so much. The gesture, the voice was Eric's, but I had no awareness of that. All I was aware of as though Baba was talking to John. Who do you take me to be? And John, I saw him sort of hesitate, sort of taken back, because he'd read little, and he had had little time to absorb Baba and what he thought of Baba, and read much. And then he said in a hesitant voice, a perfect master. And Baba looked at him sort of quizzically, gently. He wasn't stern and reprimanding, but sort of questioning, how do you know? And I thought, yes, I'm watching this, and I'm absorbing, and I can remember sitting there thinking, God, that is such a good point. How would you know? It's so easy to say, oh yes, he's God, or he's a perfect master. How would you know? You can't. Either, yes, anyway, we won't go into it. But while I'm absorbing this, and all of a sudden Barbara just turns the face. It's only a little turning, of course. Suddenly looks at me and says, "Who do you take me to be?" And to this day, I have no idea where it came from. I can honestly say it was the only articulate thing I ever said to Barbara. It was very clear and precise. "You are my ideal. You are what I would like to be myself." And Barbara beamed. And again, that was that occasion when you sort of, the whole world lights up. And what was so interesting was that he beamed and then he turned. And this, I can see that gesture now. He turned like this with his hand, sort of, and looking at Erich. He just glanced up, and that gesture. And you could say, if you like, who knows what that meant. But in other words, did you hear that? That's a new one, or whatever. But the point was that all of a sudden I realised there was Erich's voice. And what was so when I think about it, when I recall what it was like with Erich interpreting Barbara, it was as though what was interesting was how Erich blended into Barbara's being, as it were. That it seemed as though, I mean, in other words, Erich's voice just conveyed so well Barbara's expressions and gestures, so that it became, in a sense, it became as though it was Barbara talking. How beautifully.
That's pretty difficult, isn't it? To
very
have
difficult.
no existence of yourself.
That's right.
And beaming through
Yes.
Barbara.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
through Barbara's voice, and
Yes.
felt other people feeling that way.
Yes, exactly.
Just an extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary. Somehow or other, Erich just conveyed so well, so thoroughly.
So what did Erich say?
Yeah, and so Erich didn't know. It was just that. And then it went on, and then there were things like Barbara said he directed that the three of us were to occupy the seclusion cabin, which is near the Samadhi.
What did you think Barbara meant when he looked at Erich like that?
He said that already.
Yeah.
See, look, there is another new version or something.
No, I mean, it could say that. My feeling was it was that Barbara registered with Erich.
Referring.
Make a note. Note that. In other words, Maya Prasad, all I can say is that it appears that I do have a connection, a firm connection with Barbara. Barbara said in 1956, when he came to Australia, there was an occasion when he called Francis and myself into the big room, and I remember him seated on the bed, and there was only Erich there. And I can't remember what else was said, but one thing that stood out very clearly, and of course it meant so much to me, was that he said, "I know that you two will stick to me to the end." And all I can think of is that it was that was the sort of beginning, in a sense, that Barbara was saying, Erich, because I did have a connection with Erich.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I'm just talking.
Because Erich actually watched you saying your first interview, and he watched you what Baba said to you in 1956, and he knows that Baba's will about you and
Yes,
Baba's
yes,
understanding
yes,
about you.
yes,
So that's
yes,
probably
yes,
why he has a connection.
yeah. It's
So,
yeah.
tell me about the interview.
Yes, yes. So, so there was that he directed that we should sit, that we should occupy the seclusion cabin, not move out of the dormitory with the rest of the men. But as it happened, that seclusion cabin only fitted 2 beds, not the 3. So Francis was there for the whole period. For the rest of that period, and John and I shared 50-50. So John had about a week and I had about a week there, or 8 or 9 days, I've forgotten now. But again, in other words, what was so interesting was the little attention that Baba gave to us as he would to other people. Little things that were important, and important in terms of our overall development, and and then of course he told me to spread his name and message. That was the beginning, and I said during the interview,
so
and
how did it come?
It was just Baba looked at me and said, "Bill, spread my message. Tell people about me." Sorry, I can't tell you what, because he said it each time that I was with him, with increasing emphasis and in various ways. Tell people about me, spread my message, give people, tell them my love and truth. And one time he said, teach them, which I immediately took, and I feel very strongly that it was a sort of an injunction to me to try to live as much as I could and only give out. I'm not a teacher, if you know what I mean. When he said teach them, what he's really saying is, Bill, don't just say words. So try in every way to live what in a way that would please me, that would then be able to, you could convey to others. And I feel extremely grateful that in no sense do I feel being a teacher, nor do I want to be, and I don't have people who, I'm not like Don Stevens or...
You don't have disciples.
Exactly. which I'm so grateful for, because I would